What would you do if someone tried to take what was rightfully yours simply because they thought they were more important? This is the story of Olivia Grant, a determined and successful businesswoman whose calm defiance in the face of blatant entitlement turned a routine flight into an unforgettable lesson in justice. On what should have been a peaceful trip, one entitled passenger's audacity set off a chain of events that no one on board could have predicted. A confrontation over a seat quickly spiraled into a shocking twist of karma, leaving the entire crew and a so-called VIP passenger facing the consequences of their actions. If you love inspiring stories of resilience, fairness, and unexpected justice, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share this video to inspire others. Your support helps us bring impactful tales like this to an even wider audience. Now, sit back and let's dive into the remarkable story of Olivia Grant, a woman who proved that composure, confidence, and standing your ground can turn any situation around. Olivia Grant settled into her plush first-class seat, exhaling deeply as the hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin. After weeks of grueling meetings and long nights, this moment of peace was more than just a luxury, it was a reward. Outside her window, the setting sun painted the tarmac in hues of gold and crimson, a quiet reminder of the beauty she often overlooked in her fast-paced life. Olivia had earned this. As the founder and CEO of a thriving tech company, her journey to success was anything but easy. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she learned early on that nothing would be handed to her. Her parents, hardworking and resilient, instilled in her an unshakable determination to rise above limitations and societal expectations. Years of sacrifice and relentless work had brought her here, her name etched among the industry's top leaders. But Olivia's success wasn't just about wealth or recognition. It was about proving that barriers could be broken and dreams could be realized, no matter where you start. As she adjusted the silk scarf around her neck and reached for her leather notebook, the cabin around her buzzed with quiet opulence. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air, mingling with faint notes of designer perfume from her fellow first-class passengers. The seats, spacious, luxurious, and pristine, promised comfort few could afford. A passing flight attendant offered a warm smile as they placed a glass of sparkling water on her tray. Olivia accepted it with a gracious nod, savoring the cool bubbles as they danced against her lips. Everything about this moment felt earned this small slice of calm after a relentless climb to the top. But Olivia knew better than to get too comfortable. Perfection, as life had taught her, could be fleeting. And as a small commotion stirred near the front of the cabin, Olivia's instincts told her this moment of peace was about to come to an abrupt end. The soft hum of the airplane engines was suddenly disrupted by the click of high heels and the unmistakable presence of someone who believed the world revolved around them. Olivia Grant glanced up briefly as a tall blonde woman entered the first-class cabin, her expensive handbag dangling from her elbow like a trophy. Her posture radiated entitlement, back straight, chin tilted upward as though the cabin itself were beneath her. Behind her trailed a shorter companion, seemingly more hesitant, trying to match her pace. "Can you believe this?" The woman muttered loudly, her tone dripping with disdain. "This seat assignment is ridiculous." Passengers stole quick glances but returned to their tablets and newspapers, eager to avoid confrontation. Olivia, however, noticed when the woman whose companion had called her Evelyn stopped directly beside her seat. Evelyn's sharp, assessing gaze landed on Olivia as if she were an unwelcome obstacle. "Excuse me," Evelyn said crisply, her voice unnervingly polite yet edged with expectation. Olivia looked up from her notebook, meeting Evelyn's gaze calmly. "Yes." "There's been a mistake," Evelyn said, gesturing toward the seat with her perfectly manicured hand. "This is supposed to be my seat." Olivia's brow arched slightly. "This is my seat 1A," she replied evenly. "I reserved it weeks ago." Evelyn's lips curled into a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You see, I'm a Platinum Elite member with this airline. I always get priority seating. You must understand this is an error, and I'm sure you'd be more comfortable in another seat." The arrogance in her voice was palpable, but Olivia didn't flinch. She had seen this kind of entitlement before, the unspoken suggestion that someone like her didn't belong here. "I'm quite comfortable where I am," Olivia said, her tone calm and measured. Evelyn's smile faltered as frustration flashed across her face. Before she could respond, a flight attendant approached. His uniform was pristine, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes flicked toward Evelyn with thinly disguised sympathy. "Is there an issue here?" he asked, glancing between the two women. "Yes, there is," Evelyn replied quickly, her voice adopting a tone of exaggerated annoyance. "This seat, my seat, has been mistakenly assigned to someone else." The attendant turned toward Olivia, his demeanor polite but faintly skeptical. "May I see your boarding pass, ma'am?" Without missing a beat, Olivia handed over her boarding pass. Her heart remained steady, though the familiar weight of being challenged for her place was not lost on her. The flight attendant examined the ticket and nodded reluctantly. "This is indeed your seat, Ms. Grant." Evelyn's expression darkened as her companion shifted uncomfortably beside her. "That can't be right," Evelyn muttered, her voice sharpening with indignation. The tension in the cabin thickened as the flight attendant hesitated, clearly torn between appeasing Evelyn, a platinum elite passenger, and respecting Olivia's rightful claim. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Olivia sat still, her composure unwavering, as if daring anyone to challenge her further. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Evelyn's type rarely accepted no for an answer. Evelyn Stokes wasn't the type to back down, and her frustration was becoming palpable. Her sharp, clipped voice cut through the cabin like a blade. "I need to speak to someone in charge. This is completely unacceptable." The flight attendant, clearly flustered, nodded quickly. "I'll call the supervisor, ma'am. Please, one moment." Evelyn crossed her arms with an air of smug triumph, her gaze flicking to Olivia as if the matter were already settled. Olivia, for her part, sat calmly in her seat, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her leather notebook. She had been through battles like this before, different settings, different faces, but the same undertones. She knew the game. Moments later, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and an air of authority approached. Her name tag read Deborah Lane, and the click of her polished black heels signaled her arrival before she even spoke. "Good evening, ladies. I understand there's a concern about seat assignments." Yes, Evelyn jumped in before Deborah could finish, her tone laced with entitlement. "This seat 1A was clearly meant for me. I'm a Platinum Elite member. I always sit here. I don't know how this mix-up happened, but I expect it to be resolved immediately." Deborah turned to Olivia, who met her gaze evenly. "May I see your boarding pass, Ms. Grant?" Deborah asked, her voice polite but tinged with weariness, as if she'd seen this scenario play out countless times before. Olivia didn't hesitate. She handed over her ticket once more, her movements deliberate, her composure unwavering. Deborah scanned it, her brow furrowing slightly before looking back at Evelyn. "Ma'am, there's no mistake. Seat 1A is correctly assigned to Ms. Grant." Evelyn's face flushed. "Are you sure? I mean, look at my account, Platinum Elite. I've spent more money on this airline than she's probably made in a year." The words were sharp, intentional, and carried the unspoken implication that Olivia's presence in first class was somehow an affront to Evelyn's perceived importance. Deborah hesitated for a moment, her professional mask flickering as she processed Evelyn's words. It wasn't lost on Olivia that the supervisor's demeanor seemed more deferential to Evelyn. Years of subtle biases had made Olivia acutely aware of moments like these when fairness was being quietly weighed against appeasement. "Ms. Grant," Deborah began carefully, "would you mind relocating to another seat? We do have an open spot in 2C. It's still first class, and it might help us resolve this situation more smoothly." The cabin seemed to hold its collective breath. Olivia tilted her head slightly as if processing the request. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm but carried a razor-sharp edge. "I've already made myself clear, Ms. Lane. This is my seat. I reserved it weeks ago. I paid for it, and I see no reason to move." Evelyn's frustration boiled over. "Are you seriously going to let this happen?" she hissed, turning to Deborah. "Do you know who I am? I've been loyal to this airline for years." Deborah shifted uncomfortably on her heels. The weight of Evelyn's anger and her Platinum Elite status pressed heavily on her. Behind her, the young flight attendant hovered nervously, his body language subtly leaning toward Evelyn's side, as if silently pleading for Olivia to make this easier on everyone. But Olivia didn't waver. She sat back in her seat, her calm composure contrasting sharply with Evelyn's escalating indignation. "I respect your position, Ms. Lane," Olivia said quietly, "but I will not be giving up this seat. My ticket is valid, and this discussion should end here." Evelyn's jaw tightened, her cheeks flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. "This is outrageous," she muttered, throwing up her hands. "I'll be contacting corporate, immediately." Deborah sighed softly, a flicker of defeat in her expression as the tension hung heavy in the cabin. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes darting between Olivia and Evelyn, silently choosing sides. But Olivia didn't need their validation. She had spoken her truth, and now she would wait to see if the system would finally do the right thing. The tension in the first-class cabin hung like a storm cloud, thick and suffocating. Evelyn Stokes stood stiffly beside Olivia Grant's seat, her frustration boiling over with every second that passed. "This is unacceptable," she hissed. "I'm not going to let this go. I'll take this straight to corporate." Olivia, still seated with an air of practiced calm, simply tilted her head and regarded Evelyn with a look that was equal parts patience and quiet power. Then, without a word, she reached for her phone. The action, subtle yet deliberate, shifted the energy in the room. Passengers who had been pretending not to watch the escalating confrontation now turned their attention to Olivia. The faint sound of a ringtone hummed through the air, soft yet jarring against the stillness. Olivia pressed the phone to her ear, her voice smooth and confident as she spoke. "Hi, Marcus. I'm sorry to interrupt your evening, but we have a situation here. I'm on flight 432 first class cabin. Seat 1A. I'm being asked incorrectly to move from my assigned seat." There was a pause, and though the person on the other end couldn't be heard, the hushed murmurs in the cabin grew louder. Flight attendants exchanged uncertain glances, and Evelyn's companion shrank back into her seat, clearly wishing to disappear. Yes, Olivia continued, her tone steady but unmistakably firm. I would appreciate it if you could ensure this matter is resolved immediately. Thank you. As she ended the call, Olivia slipped the phone back into her bag and turned her attention back to the cabin with a calm that unsettled everyone, especially Evelyn. The blonde woman's face had turned an unattractive shade of red as she sputtered, "Who did you just call? You think you can pull strings and intimidate people? This isn't over." Before Olivia could respond, a deep, authoritative voice cut through the rising tension. "Is there a problem here?" The captain himself had appeared at the entrance to the first-class cabin. His uniform was pristine, his presence commanding. As he approached, the murmurs quieted, and even Evelyn seemed momentarily unsure of herself. "Yes, there is," Evelyn said quickly, seizing the opportunity. "This woman is in my seat. I've explained repeatedly that I'm a Platinum Elite member, and I always get priority seating. This has to be a mistake." The captain turned his gaze toward Olivia. She met it evenly, her calm demeanor unwavering. "Captain, there's no mistake," she said, her voice steady. "This is my seat. My boarding pass confirms it, and I have no intention of giving it up." The captain nodded, then turned to Deborah, the flight supervisor. "Ms. Lane, is there any confusion with the passenger manifest?" Deborah, flustered but composed, shook her head. "No, Captain. Seat 1A is correctly assigned to Ms. Grant." Evelyn's face contorted with disbelief. "You're siding with her? Over me? I spend tens of thousands of dollars with this airline every year. I'll call my lawyers. I'll have all of you fired. Do you know who I am?" The captain's expression remained neutral, his voice firm. "Mrs. Stokes, your Platinum Elite status does not give you the right to disregard airline policies or displace other passengers. Ms. Grant is in her rightful seat and this matter is settled. If you refuse to comply, I'll have no choice but to remove you from the flight." The cabin let out a collective breath, though it was quickly replaced by a charged silence. Evelyn's eyes darted around, searching for anyone to back her up. But there were no allies here. Her companion sat frozen, unwilling to get involved, and the other passengers avoided her gaze. "This isn't over," Evelyn muttered, her voice shaking with anger. "You'll regret this. All of you." Olivia didn't flinch. She simply picked up her notebook, opened it, and began jotting down notes as though nothing had happened. The quiet confidence she exuded was unshakable, a stark contrast to Evelyn's unraveling composure. The captain turned to Deborah and the attendants. "Let's prepare for takeoff," he said calmly before giving Olivia a respectful nod. "Thank you for your patience, Ms. Grant." Evelyn, still standing there, looked as though she might explode, but with the captain's word final and no one left to rally to her side, she sank back into her seat, her expression livid and humiliated. Olivia remained calm, her focus back on her notes. She had said nothing more than necessary, but her action spoke volumes. She was not to be underestimated. The tension in the cabin had barely settled when the soft hiss of the cabin door opening drew everyone's attention. Two sharply dressed men in dark suits stepped inside, their presence immediately commanding authority. Their polished shoes clicked against the floor as they strode into the first-class section, briefcases in hand. Passengers craned their necks to get a better look, and even Evelyn Stokes seemed momentarily stunned into silence. "Good evening," one of the men said, his voice calm but firm. "We're representatives from the airline's corporate office. We need to address a situation that's been brought to our attention." Evelyn's face lit up as if salvation had arrived. "Finally," she exclaimed, throwing her hands up dramatically. "You're here to deal with this," she gestured sharply toward Olivia. "This woman is sitting in my seat. I'm a Platinum Elite member, and I've been treated disgracefully. I want this resolved immediately." The taller representative raised a hand, cutting Evelyn off mid-rant. His gaze turned toward Deborah, the flight supervisor, who stood awkwardly nearby. "Ms. Lane, can you confirm the seating situation?" Deborah swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir. Seat 1A is correctly assigned to Ms. Grant. There's been no error." The representative turned to Evelyn, his demeanor unyielding. "Mrs. Stokes, we've reviewed the details of this incident, including statements from the crew and multiple passenger observations. You were asked to respect the seating assignment and airline policies, and you have repeatedly refused." Evelyn's face fell, her confidence cracking. "What? That's not true. I've done nothing wrong." Rearing her protests, the second representative stepped forward, his tone firm and measured. "Mrs. Stokes, your behavior today has been unacceptable and in violation of our passenger conduct policies. We are now left with no choice but to remove you from this flight." The cabin fell into a stunned silence. Evelyn's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're removing me? I'm a loyal customer, a Platinum Elite member. You can't do this." The first representative's voice remained unwavering. "Your status does not exempt you from following the rules or treating others with respect. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the plane." Evelyn's face turned red with anger and humiliation. "This is outrageous. I'll have your jobs for this," she screeched as she was forced to gather her belongings. Her companion, clearly mortified, trailed behind her in silence. Passengers exchanged knowing glances as Evelyn was led down the aisle, her threats fading into the distance as the cabin door hissed shut once more. The flight crew, including Deborah and the young attendant, stood frozen in place. One of the corporate representatives turned to them, his expression stern. "We'll be addressing this incident further. Your handling of the situation was unacceptable." The crew's pale faces said it all. Without another word, they were escorted toward the galley, their careers now uncertain. Meanwhile, Olivia Grant remained in her seat, perfectly composed, her hands resting lightly on her notebook. She didn't smile or gloat. There was no need. Her quiet triumph spoke volumes, a woman who had held her ground, not through shouting or anger, but through unshakable composure and persistence. Passengers who had been silent through it all now looked at Olivia with something resembling admiration, understanding the quiet power of someone who knew her worth and refused to accept anything less. As the flight prepared for takeoff, the cabin seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief. Olivia opened her notebook once again, flipping to a fresh page, and resumed writing as though nothing had happened. She had made her point gracefully and powerfully. And Evelyn. She had been left to face the consequences of her entitlement, a stark reminder that respect and fairness would always prevail in the end. In the days following the incident, the fallout was swift and decisive. News of the confrontation spread quickly, fueled by whispers among passengers and murmurs on social media. Witnesses on the flight shared their accounts, how an entitled passenger had challenged someone who rightfully belonged, and how it had all unraveled in the most unexpected way. Evelyn Stokes, once proud of her platinum elite status, was informed of its revocation via an email from the airline's corporate office. The message was curt and unapologetic. "Due to your behavior on Flight 432, your platinum elite membership has been terminated, effective immediately. Such actions are inconsistent with our values and policies." For Evelyn, the loss was more than just a status. It was a blow to her carefully curated image of privilege and exclusivity. Corporate headquarters went a step further, releasing a formal statement that sent shockwaves through the travel industry. The airline acknowledged the incident without naming names, stating their renewed commitment to fostering respect and equity for all passengers. The statement read, "We regret any situation where a passenger feels disrespected or treated unfairly. Effective immediately, we will implement enhanced diversity and inclusivity training for all staff, alongside stricter protocols for handling passenger disputes to ensure fairness, dignity, and respect for everyone on board." The announcement was met with widespread praise. Advocates for social justice hailed it as a necessary move in holding companies accountable for biases, whether explicit or subtle. Many saw it as a wake-up call for other industries to address the treatment of minority individuals in spaces traditionally dominated by privilege and entitlement. At the center of it all was Olivia Grant, though she never sought the spotlight. For her, the confrontation on that flight was just one of many battles she had fought in her life. As a black woman in corporate America, Olivia had faced similar challenges before, moments where her competence, presence, or even success had been questioned simply because of who she was. But this time, her quiet refusal to accept injustice had resonated far beyond the first-class cabin. Olivia had become a symbol of resilience and justice, a reminder that dignity is not negotiable and that composure in the face of bias is a strength unmatched by entitlement or privilege. In a rare interview weeks later, Olivia reflected on the incident with characteristic grace. "It wasn't about a seat," she explained. "It was about principle. When you know your worth, you don't let anyone diminish it, no matter how loudly they demand otherwise." Her words struck a chord, inspiring countless others to share their own stories of bias and perseverance. Her actions also sent a clear message to corporations. Accountability matters. Organizations cannot turn a blind eye to behavior that undermines fairness and inclusivity. The airline's response was swift, but it came only because someone Olivia refused to back down. Meanwhile, Evelyn faded from public view, her threats of legal action amounting to nothing. For all her platinum elite privileges and bluster, she had learned the hard way that entitlement is no match for integrity. The incident on Flight 402 was more than just a viral story. It became a turning point. It forced difficult but necessary conversations about bias, respect, and equity in spaces where they were long overdue. And at its heart was one woman's steadfast refusal to move not just from her seat, but from her belief in what is right. As the dust settled, Olivia returned to her work, continuing to lead her company with the same quiet confidence that had carried her through that flight. Her actions reminded the world that sometimes the most powerful response isn't shouting or anger, it's knowing your worth, standing your ground, and letting the truth speak for itself. For those who watched the events unfold, Olivia's story was more than inspiring. It was a lesson in justice, grace, and the quiet strength that changes the world. The story of Olivia Grant is more than just a confrontation on a flight. It's a powerful reminder that standing up for what's right doesn't always require anger or shouting. Sometimes it's the calmest, most composed response that carries the greatest strength. Olivia's quiet defiance turned entitlement into accountability and reminded us all that dignity and fairness are not privileges, they're rights. We live in a world where challenges like this happen far too often. Whether it's in a workplace, a public space, or even on a flight, people are sometimes judged unfairly, their presence questioned simply because of who they are. But Olivia's story proves that when you stand your ground with calm confidence, you can shift the balance and bring about real change. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up for yourself or someone else? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to find their own courage. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of resilience, justice, and inspiration. And if you think someone in your life needs to hear this, share the video with them. Because in the end, one truth remains: karma always finds its way, especially when you stand your ground. Thank you for watching, and until next time, remember to stay strong, stay kind, and never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong.